Welcome to the weekly Major League Baseball wrap up. Today we are now 2 months into the season, so let's take a quick look around the league, see where teams are at, and let's start where we always do with the injury wrap up. Starting us off, we have Levin Sosa, utility player for the Chicago White Sox, placed in the IL with a right hip flexor strain. He's expected to be activated once he's first able to, so minimum stay for him, not a major problem. Jordan Westburg, third baseman for the Baltimore Orioles, was evaluated yesterday to determine if he was ready to return to the majors after rehabbing at AAA for the last week, and it is expected he will be activated this weekend. Starting pitcher for the San Diego Padres, Yu Darvish, had the team come out and say they are optimistic he will pitch in the majors before the end of June in his recovery from his right elbow injury. He did have a setback a few weeks back. And the team is allowing him to kind of do his own thing in his rehab process. So they're optimistic that he'll pitch before the end of June. That's a good sign for Padres fans. Starting pitcher for the Tampa Rays, Shane McClanahan, set to throw his first bullpen session since suffering a triceps injury in spring training on Friday. He should be able to turn around the All-Star break after making a what is likely to be lengthy rehab stint at some point in the near future. Starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, Hunter Green, lands back on the IL with the right groin strain that put him on the IL earlier this month. Because it is the same injury, they are awaiting MRIs to determine the severity, but it is expected he will miss at least another month of the season. Starting pitcher for the Minnesota Twins, Pablo Lopez, was also placed in the IL with a lat strain after being removed from his start Tuesday. He is likely to miss a month minimum, just like everyone else we've seen that has lat strains this season. Eduardo Rodriguez, already pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, is set to be activated from the IL for a start this weekend for the team. Good news there. Jordan Hicks, relief pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, was placed in the IL with right toe inflammation. His return timetable is unknown. Yuri Perez, starting pitcher for the Miami Marlins, is set to be activated to make his season debut on Monday, coming back from Tommy John surgery. Cole Reagan, starting pitcher for the Kansas City Royals, is set to be activated and start today, so good news for Kansas City fans. Mark Vientos, third baseman for the New York Mets, was placed in the IL with a hamstring strain, likely to be out for around a month. Jonathan Cannon, starting pitcher for the Chicago White Sox, was placed in the IL with a lower back strain. He attempted to pitch through the injury on Monday, but obviously he was not able to come out of that start very well, and his return timetable is unknown at this point. Relief pitcher for the New York Yankees, Luke Weaver, placed in the IL after suffering a hamstring strain when warming up in the bullpen Sunday. He will be out 4 to 6 weeks. Starting pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, Corbin Burns, left his start on Monday, I believe it was. He was placed in the IL Tuesday with an elbow injury. He will rest for a couple weeks before being reevaluated. He did not immediately get the expected prognosis of needing Tommy John surgery, so good news so far there. Tanner Gordon, starting pitcher for the Colorado Rockies, was placed in the IL with an oblique strain. He will be out minimum of a month. First baseman for the Athletics, Nick Kurtz, is set to return from the IL on June 9th. Good news there. Max Mayer, starting pitcher for the Miami Marlins, has been dealing with a hip issue for his last few starts, which notably were not up to par with where the first handful of starts were in his season. After his Monday start, it got worse, so he was placed in the IL to rest. Gunnar Hoglund, starting pitcher for the Athletics, was placed in the IL with a hip impingement. His return timetable is unknown. Relief pitcher for the Angels, Robert Stevenson, who had just returned from Tommy John surgery, was placed in the IL with a biceps inflammation injury. It is unclear if he will need more than minimum time at this point. Yohan Moncada, third baseman, also for the Angels, was placed in the IL with right knee inflammation. His return timetable is unknown at this point, but this is his second IL stint of the season. Michael Kopech, relief pitcher for the LA Dodgers, is set to return from the IL possibly this weekend or early next week, which is good news because relief pitcher for the Dodgers, Luis Garcia, was placed in the IL with a right adductor strain. He's expected to miss at least a month. Starting pitcher for the Texas Rangers, Nathan Eovaldi, was placed in the IL with right elbow inflammation. The initial hope after last week's start was that he could rest for a few days, but an IL stint was determined to be needed once the swelling started to recede and they were able to do proper imaging. He's expected to miss only the minimum after the imaging came back perfectly clean. Relief pitcher, for the Boston Red Sox, Justin Slater, was placed in the IL with a right shoulder inflammation. He does not appear to be serious, according to the team. His timetable is unknown, however. Ryan Mountcastle, first baseman for the Baltimore Orioles, was placed in the IL with a hamstring strain. He's expected to miss a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks. Cedric Mullins, center fielder for the Orioles, also placed in the IL with a hamstring strain. However, it was called mild in nature, and he is set to possibly return after the minimum 10 days. Lucas Urseg, right relief pitcher for the Kansas City Royals, placed in the IL with a lower back strain. He is also supposed to return after the minimum stay. And Jackson Jobe, starting pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, placed in the IL with a grade 1 flexor strain. The return timetable is unknown, but the typical recovery time for that type of injury is around a month. Now let's get onto the rehab trail. Gary Sanchez, catcher for the Baltimore Orioles, was sent to AAA to begin a rehab assignment yesterday. He'll be joined over the weekend by outfielder Tyler O'Neill at AAA as well. Ha-Seong Kim, shortstop for the Tampa Bay Rays, is set to play shortstop for the first time at AAA on his rehab assignment. He had previously only played second base and DH so far. Shane Bieber, starting pitcher for the Cleveland Guardians, finally made his first rehab start at the Arizona Complex League, throwing 2 1/3 scoreless frames in his recovery from Tommy John surgery. Logan Gilbert, starting pitcher for the Seattle Mariners, set to be reevaluated after his second rehab start yesterday to decide if he's ready to return to the majors for the next turn to the rotation. More bad news for Milwaukee fans as Brandon Woodruff, starting pitcher, was hit by a comebacker in his rehab start at AAA on Tuesday. He will receive x-rays to determine the severity, if there is any breaks or just a rough bruise. But he left in what was supposed to be his final rehab start before making his long-awaited return from shoulder surgery. Yamir Candelario, utility player for the Reds, began his rehab assignment with the Complex League, which is set to be moved to AAA later this week. Frankie Montas, starting pitcher for the New York Mets, had his third rehab start Tuesday at AAA. He went 4 innings, gave up 5 runs, 8 hits, 1 walk, and 4 Ks. It is expected he will make one more rehab start before returning to the majors. Hopefully, he's able to fare better than that start on Tuesday. Emmett Sheehan, starting pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers, went 3 innings, gave up 2 hits, 5 Ks in a scoreless outing at AAA on Sunday. JT Ginn, starting pitcher for the Athletics, had to begin his rehab assignment today. And Jake Cousins, relief pitcher for the New York Yankees, set to begin his rehab assignment on Tuesday. Let's move right along to the Major League Baseball Team of the Week, leading us off in left field like we always do. Willie Castro from the Minnesota Twins. He batted .436 with a .536 on base and a 1 flat slug. He had 4 homers, 6 RBIs, 8 runs scored, and a stolen base. In center field, we have Jackson Chourio for the Milwaukee Brewers. He batted .429 with a .429 on base and a .714 slug. He had 2 homers, 8 RBIs, 8 runs scored, and 3 stolen bases. In right field, we have Juan Soto for the New York Mets, turning it up. He batted .316 with a .480 on base and an .850 or .895 slug. He had 3 homers, 6 RBIs, and 5 runs scored. Moving on to the infield, we have third baseman Max Muncy for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He batted .368 with a .478 on base and a 1.158 slug. He hit 5 homers with 11 RBIs and 6 runs scored. At shortstop, we have Francisco Lindor for the New York Mets. He batted .391 with a .481 on base and a .913 slug. He had 4 homers, 5 RBIs, and 10 runs scored with a stolen base. At second base, we have Marcus Semien starting to turn his season around for the Texas Rangers. He batted .571 with a .667 on base and a .929 slug. He had 1 homer, 3 RBIs, 6 runs scored, and 2 stolen bases. At first base, we had Jonathan Aranda for the Tampa Bay Rays. He had a .438 batting average, a .571 on base, and a .563 slug. No homers, 2 RBIs, and 5 runs scored. At designated hitter, we have Christian Yelich, who plays for the Milwaukee Brewers. He had a .458 batting average, a .480 on base, and an .833 slug with 3 homers, 7 RBIs, and 5 runs scored. At catcher, we have Cal Raleigh for the Seattle Mariners. He batted .318 with a .423 on base and a .909 slug with 4 homers, 9 RBIs, 5 runs scored, and a stolen base. Good for him. At starting pitcher, we have Mackenzie Gore for the Washington Nationals, who went 1-0 in 2 starts, 13 innings, 15 Ks, a flat 0 ERA, and a 0.62 whip. Absolute dominance from Mackenzie Gore. At relief pitcher, we have Brock Stewart for the Minnesota Twins. He went 0 for 0, 4 innings pitched, 4 Ks, 1 hold in 4 games. He had a 0 flat ERA, and he only gave up the 1 walk the entire week, so he had a .25 whip. Moving right along to our weekly Major League Baseball power rankings, starting us off where we always do at the bottom with the Colorado Rockies, who did go 3-3. They won their first series of the year, sweeping the Miami Marlins, which is really good for them and really bad for the Marlins. But they do still only have a 12-50 record after getting swept by the Mets over the weekend before that sweep of the Marlins. So good news for Rockies fans, but they still have a long way to go to start climbing up these rankings. At number 29, we still have the Chicago White Sox, who sit at 19-43 after going 1-5 last week against Baltimore and Detroit. Detroit's a rough matchup. Baltimore's been hot lately, but still 1-5, not a good week. At number 28, we have the Athletics, who fall down 3 spots after going 0-6, getting swept by the Twins and the Blue Jays. Not a good week for them. Their pitching just is not showing anything of substance right now. They're getting shelled, and their lineup isn't able to cover, which for a young lineup and a young team, it's not a good look. At number 26, at number 27, we have the Miami Marlins, who sit at 23-37, moving down 1 spot after going 1-5, getting swept by the Rockies, as I mentioned, and also losing the series 2-1 to the San Francisco Giants. They're getting Yuri Perez back, which we all went through during the injury wrap-up, which will be a really good sign for them. And Alcantara had a decent start against the Rockies, which isn't saying much, but a decent start is better than what he's been giving them for them recently. So hopefully that's forward progress so that he can recover his value for the trade deadline. At number 26, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates, who sit at 23-39, moving up 1 spot from last week. They went 2-3 against San Diego and Houston, so they had some rough matchups. So they were able to salvage 2 wins out of that. They play today to see who can win that Houston series. But again, they lose a Paul Skeens start where he goes 8 innings, giving up 1 run. That's just it's a backbreaker for Skeens, for the team, for the fan base. It's just rough when you're just not giving run support to one of the best young pitcher in the game, one of the best pitchers, period, in the game. It's just not a good look. At number 25, we have the Baltimore Orioles, who went 5-0 this past week, beating up on the White Sox and then also taking the first 2 from the Mariners, move up 3 spots from last week, showing some signs of life, which is a good thing because their pitching has been improving. They've been pitching better, and then their lineup is able to get the runs they've been able to get through, which is good signs. They need some guys jump out of slumps there, but still, winning games, always good, especially when you had the expectations this team did coming into the season. However, I will say the report did come out. They are expected to sell, and they have already told opposing teams that they will be selling. So, we'll see what happens there. At number 24, we have the Atlanta Braves, who played Boston and Arizona. They moved down, 3 spots after going 2-5. They now sit at 27-33, and it's looking harder and harder to see a silver lining and to see a path out of this for the Braves. They're just not hitting, and their pitching just isn't what it was last year either. So not good for the Braves. The Angels are next up at 23, sitting at 28-33 after going 3-3. They remain in the same spot from last week after facing Cleveland and Boston. Just a good week for the Angels despite losing some guys to injuries. They did get Mike Trout back, which is a huge boost to their offense. The Texas Rangers sit at 22 once again at a 29-33 record. They went 2-3 this past week against Seattle and Tampa. Their offense just is not hitting. I've been hammering this drum. Something needs to happen with this offense, and hopefully it happens soon. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to fall out of this race, and they might end up selling as well at the deadline. At number 21, we have the Washington Nationals. They played Arizona and Chicago. They move up 3 spots after going 4-2 against those 2 teams. They now sit at 29-32. They have 2, maybe 3 if you want to count Abrams, but James Wood and Mackenzie Gore are 2 incredibly strong building blocks for this team to hopefully continue to pile up this young talent and continue to rack up the wins. Let's go Nationals. The Reds sitting at number 20 at a 30-33 record after going, what did they go, 2-4, and moving down one spot from last week. This is a team that just isn't putting it together. Their offense isn't what it was supposed to be. Their pitching is better than it was supposed to be, but still not good enough. And they are at this point looking like a team stuck in neutral. Not good signs. Another team stuck in neutral is the Boston Red Sox, who face the Athletics and the Angels. They move up 2 spots despite going 3-3 against those teams. Now, what I can say about Boston is they still have a talented lineup. They still have a bunch of prospects that they're calling up. Marcelo Meyer or Mayer, I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name, but he got called up recently. Christian Campbell is in a absolutely horrible slump right now. Hopefully he can bust out of that, but we'll see what happens, especially with Roman Anthony supposedly on the horizon at some point this season. At number 18, with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who fall 1 spot down. They went 3-2 against Washington and Atlanta. They sit at 30-31. It's like I said, I've been saying about this team for the last few weeks. They just need to put it together. They need to pitch when they hit, and they need to hit when they pitch. It's just not matching up for them, and their bullpen is atrocious. This team looks like the Rangers did a few years ago, where they were pitching good. They had a good offense. They just needed a couple guys in the bullpen, and they ended up going out and getting that at the deadline. So maybe Arizona can do the same thing and make a run, but right now it's not looking good. At number 17, we have the Kansas City Royals, who fell down 3 spots after going 2-2 against Detroit and St. Louis. They sit at 32 and 29. Every team from now on has a winning record. So them falling has more to do with the other teams around them performance and just how I think about the team in general. Now that there's starting to become a distance between the top teams and the bottom teams. So because of that, the Royals kind of take the shaft this week as they fall down 3 spots, despite only going 2-2, and they will play a doubleheader with the Cardinals, who we'll get to in a little bit, today. So hopefully, that goes well for whoever comes out on top. At number 16, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, who move up 1 spot from last week. They went 5-1. Great week for them, coming out above 500 at 32-29, tying for second place in the AL East. They do still have a fighter's chance at the playoffs and at potentially possibly catching the Yankees at the top of the division. They just need to continue to put it together. They need to get a little bit more from their lineup. They got a big week from Addison Barger that I think he plays. Ooh, I'm actually not sure. He's a utility guy, so he plays all over the place. I was like, I thought he played third base, but Clement plays there. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Ooh, he might play second base because I think Jimenez is down. But either way, great week for them. And Bichette starting to turn around as well at shortstop, which is a big help for him because he's in a free agency year, and for the team because they need his production. At number 15, we have the Tampa Bay Rays sitting at 32-29, moving up 1 spot from last week after going 4-2 against Houston and the Rangers. Good week in Texas or a good week against Texas for the Rays. They're just getting enough hitting. They're starting to get some of their guys back from injury, and their pitching is starting to play to its potential, which is good news out there in Tampa. At number 14, we have the Seattle Mariners, who fall down 3 spots from last week. They are 32-28, and they did not have a good week, going 2-4 against Minnesota and Baltimore. They kind of are running into just some health issues with their rotation, which is not living up to the level that it set last season, which is to be expected when you have injuries. And it's just not a good sign. They finally got jumped by the Astros, which was a decent time coming, and it's been 2 or 3 weeks where they've just slowly been like, oh, well, now it's a game closer, it's a game closer, it's a game closer. Well, now they're a half game behind. So, but speaking of those Astros, they sit at number 13. They remain the same from last week of going 3-3 against Tampa and Pitt. There's no shame in losing a series to Tampa, but they got to play Pittsburgh better, in my opinion, at least. Number 12, we have the Milwaukee Brewers, who move up 3 spots after going 5-1 against the Phillies and the Reds. Really good on them being able to take care of a divisional opponent that they are better than in Cincinnati, and also being able to beat up on the Giants, who are just wildly inconsistent in their offense, is having problems. But we'll get to that in a second. Moving on to number 11, we have the Minnesota Twins, who sit at 33-27. They had a good week, going 3-2 against Seattle and the Athletics. They move up 1 spot from last week. Not much to say. They did lose Pablo Lopez, which isn't a good sign. They are a little thin in their rotation, so that kind of a loss is not good. But if they keep hitting the way they've been hitting, Buxton's back, healthy, playing like an MVP, they're gonna keep winning, keep doing good things. At number 10, we have the Cardinals, who played the Rangers and the Royals. They moved down 3 spots after going 1-3. They of course have the doubleheader today, so that's why they didn't play as much games. But really, they're lucky to still be in the top 10. 6 games above 500. They did not have a good week, and I'm beginning to question whether they just had a good week and that was that. I mean, I thought they were doing something similar to the Twins, but it doesn't look like they're holding up their end of the bargain at this point. The Guardians sit at number 9, remaining in the same spot against the Angels and the Yankees. They have so far gone 3-2. They now sit at 33-27, as well as the previous two teams. The Giants played Miami and San Diego. They remain in the same spot. They went 3-3, so good on them. But in my opinion, you got to beat your division opponents. Like I've been saying about this Giants team, they're just wildly inconsistent. Their offense has not been there in the way that they were expecting. I saw on MLB tonight they were saying that Willie Adames has like a 160-point decrease in his OPS, which is just crazy. There's reports that he's not adjusting to hitting in that stadium well, which I believe he's an opposite field hitter. Would make sense. There's a long way to go out there in Triples Alley in San Francisco. So we'll see what happens there. But the Padres sit at number 7. They went 4-2 against Pitt and San Francisco. They sit at 35-25 in second place in the National League West. They are a game behind the Dodgers, so look out, Dodgers. At number 6, we have the Phillies, who moved down 2 spots after going 2-5 against Milwaukee and Toronto. Not a good week for the Phillies as they lose out on first place from the Mets. They sit at 37-24. The Yankees fall down 2 spots after going 2-3 against the Dodgers and the Guardians. They did not have a good weekend in LA. If you didn't see, they got absolutely railroaded on Saturday after blowing a game on Friday, just reminiscent of the World Series for Yankees fans, me included. At number 4, you have the Dodgers, who move up 1 spot from last week. They played the Yankees and the Mets, just a New York week out there in LA. They move up 1 spot. They went 3-3. They are not playing the Mets well this year, which does not bode well for them in the playoffs. But we'll see what happens. The Dodgers have a lot of injuries along their pitching staff, which is hindering them. The Mets sit at number 3 after beating up on the Rockies and the Dodgers. They move up 3 spots after going 5-1. They now sit at a 39-23 record for the best record in the National League at this point. The Chicago Cubs do hold down the number 2 spot, though, after beating up on Cincinnati and Washington. They remain the same at number 2 with 3-2 record against those two teams. They have a 38-23 record overall, so only a half game behind the Mets, but still. The Tigers finish us off here at the top. The only team with 40 wins, sitting at 41-22. They went 4-2 against Kansas City and Chicago, doing what I love to see good teams do, beating up on bad teams. That has been our weekly power rankings. Please leave a comment down below on what you think of how I have teams ranked, and how you think that your team has been doing so far this season. Right now, let's look ahead to the next few weeks or the next week of baseball that we have ahead of us. Starting us off with the weekend series, we have Chicago at Detroit. Good matchup for Friday to Sunday. Seeing how the top two teams in my power rankings are going to fare against each other. It'll just be a good matchup of the Detroit pitching versus Chicago's hitting. I really want to see Skubal face that lineup and how that lineup's able to handle what Skubal has to offer. That Maddox that Skubal threw was fantastic. The next series I'm looking forward to is, of course, the renewal of the great baseball rivalry, Red Sox at the Yankees, Friday to Sunday. As a Yankees fan, I'm especially looking forward to this. It's the first time we get to see Boston. I really do just want to beat up on them, but it'll be interesting to see how the Yankees handle another American League East foe. And our last matchup for the weekend is San Diego at Milwaukee, Friday to Sunday. 2 second-place teams in their division, 2 teams that pitch well, 2 teams that have star hitters in Tatis and Merrill and Machado for the Padres, and then the Brewers have Yelich and Churio, and then Hoskins have a good season for them as well. So we'll see how it turns out. I do expect San Diego to be able to take 2 of 3, but we'll see what happens. Moving on to the beginning of the following week, we have the Cubs at the Phillies, Monday to Wednesday, two playoff contending teams matching up right there. So a tough week for Chicago on the road at that. We also have the Dodgers at the Padres, top two teams in the NL West, taking battle in San Diego Monday to Wednesday. And then we have the Yankees at the Royals Tuesday to Thursday, making up for the division series last year. But that has been our episode for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you would like to see more, there will be videos on the screen. Please subscribe if you enjoyed, and we will see you next week.